Hello and welcome to another episode in our series about the Georgia Early Learning and Development Standards, or the GELDS. I'm Laura Evans, Standards Coordinator at Bright from the Start. Today's webinar will focus on how the GELDS will support our pre-K teachers. We will explore what's new with the GELDS, what changes pre-K teachers can expect, and how the GELDS will work with curriculum and assessment. If you haven't already, I encourage you to go back and watch our other GELDS webinars for more information. You can find all these informational webinars at gelds.decal.ga.gov. Now, I'm going to take a few minutes to give some background on this project and an overview of the structure and language of the new GELDS. So, Georgia began revising the state's early learning standards back in 2010, so it's been a lengthy and thorough process. The revision stemmed for, one, the need for higher quality standards in Georgia for birth through 5, and the need for a better alignment with the CCGPS, the Common Core Georgia Performance Standards for K through 12. We knew the standards that we had before were good, but we just wanted to make them better. So we commissioned top researchers in early childhood education to conduct an alignment study that examined content, rigor, and age appropriateness. So based on the researchers' recommendations, we developed a new set of standards that will take the place of the GELDS for birth to 3, the Georgia Early Learning Standards, and the pre-K content standards. Our new standards for birth to 5 are the Georgia Early Learning and Development Standards, the GELDS. So we took two sets of standards, the GELDS for birth to 3 and the pre-K content standards, and now we have one cohesive, research-based set of standards that reflect Georgia's commitment to prepare young children for school and beyond. They also are supported by extensive practice and research, and they provide a good linkage from birth to 5 to kindergarten and beyond. The GELDS also cover all domains of learning, or all areas of learning. First, there's physical development and motor skills. This is your health and well-being, your use of senses, and your motor skills, which includes those gross motor skills and the fine motor skills. Pre-K teachers know that when children are gluing little things together and stringing beads on yarn and playing with Play-Doh, they're really working on those little tiny muscles in their hands that help them build up those writing skills that will be helpful later on. The second area of learning is social and emotional development, and this includes your developing a sense of self, your self-regulation, and developing a sense of self with others. And this is where we'll be helping children develop those social skills with peers and social skills with adults that will help them when they get into a more academic environment. It will help them request help from adults. It will help them take turns and work in a cooperative group setting. The third area is approaches to play and learning. This will be a new area for pre-K teachers. Some of these skills were embedded in the pre-K content standards, but based on our researchers' recommendations, we decided to pull this area out and make its own separate domain. So under this, you have initiative and exploration, attentiveness and persistence, and play. Teaching children persistence is an important skill that will help them later on. It helps show them that sometimes to be successful at something, you have to try several times, even though you might fail. So when children decide to tackle a difficult puzzle in class, they may not succeed the first time, but they keep trying, and that persistence is what will help them later on. The fourth area is communication, language, and literacy. This covers their receptive language, their listening skills, their expressive language, how they communicate, and then early reading and early writing. The last area or domain of learning is cognitive development, and this domain is more of your disciplinary areas. So this would include your math, your social studies, your science, creative development, and a new area that pre-K teachers will notice is cognitive processes. This is teaching children those important thinking skills, higher order thinking skills, and problem-solving skills. So a little bit more about our language. You start out with that overarching learning domain, and then you have a strand, which is a grouping of similar standards. And then you have your standards, which are your general statements of knowledge. And then those lead to your age-appropriate indicators, which tell us specific, measurable, observable statements. And then you have your examples, and this is exactly how it would look in the classroom if a child accomplished this skill. One more slide that demonstrates the structure and illustrates how things are set up with the new GELDS is this one. It shows your communication, language, and literacy domain, early reading strand. Under that, you have standard CLL 6, which is the sixth standard in that domain. The child will develop early phonological awareness, which is the awareness of units of sound. And then under that standard, you have 5 age-appropriate indicators. And this really shows that natural progression of the skill from birth all the way to 60 months. So you can see with the pre-K standard, which would be the 48 to 60 month indicator, the child would identify and produce rhyming words. Let's take a look at what that would look like in a pre-K classroom.
Can you help me get the train started? Okay, here we go. Hamza, do you have a word that rhymes with ugh? Hamza said Doug. Can we build the word Doug? Doug. Hamza, get on board the rhyming train. Harris, do you have a word that rhymes with ugh and Doug? Bug. Let's build the word bug. Bug. You thought of it in your head. That's a perfect place to think of something. Now, let's make sure they all rhyme. Ugh, Doug, bug. They all end in the same sound. They all end in ugh. You got it. They rhyme. Here we go. Ready, passengers? Get those arms moving.
I have with me today Susan Adams, who's the Assistant Commissioner for Georgia's Pre-K. Welcome, Susan. And I also have Jackie Shivers with me today, who is the Director of Quality Support for Georgia's Pre-K. Welcome, Jackie. So let's talk about the rollout of the GELDS. What should Georgia's Pre-K teachers expect in the next few years? Susan?
So for Georgia Pre-K teachers, standards are not new. Pre-K teachers are used to teaching from the Pre-K content standards. They understand the importance of basing their instruction and these standards that tell us what children should know and be able to do at age 4. So for Pre-K teachers, it's really about seeing what's new. And like you mentioned, there's some new standards and some new domains to pay attention to. But for Pre-K teachers overall, it's something that they're going to be used to and comfortable with.
One thing they're also used to is the correlation between standards, assessment, and curriculum. Let's take a look at the next 2 slides. So what are the main 3 ways that Pre-K teachers will use the GELDS?
Sure. So Pre-K teachers are going to use these new standards to look at how do they plan their instruction. So when they think about what are the things that I'm going to do in my classroom, how do I pick my activities, they're going to look at these standards. Then they're going to use them to guide how they assess students and know whether students are making progress on those standards. And then of course they're going to use them to make curriculum instruction decisions. So your curriculum is your support tool that gives you ideas and a roadmap, but your standards are going to be what you use to decide how you're going to address things and then what activities you're going to choose from your curriculum.
I think this diagram really illustrates the connection. Let's take a look. So you start with the GELDS and then...
Sure. This diagram is a nice illustration of how teachers use standards. Standards and assessment and curriculum should all be tied together. The standards are going to be where you start, your foundation, but then you're going to look at your curriculum to help you choose activities, and then you're also all along need to be assessing what children can do and whether they're meeting those standards. So if I have a child that's not meeting a certain standard, then I'm going to go back and look and say, let's go back and look at these standards, and maybe I'll look at what the 3-year-old standard says to see if that would help me plan an activity. So all 3 teachers are continually using in their classroom to guide their instruction.
Okay. Jackie, I talked a little bit about this, but pre-K teachers should expect to see some positive changes with the GELDS. What are some of those positive changes they can expect?
Well, one positive change teachers can expect is better alignment with the Common Core Georgia performance standards for kindergarten. Teachers will also see that the GELDS start at birth to 5 years of age, and it shows a natural progression of skills. And what this does is it allows for flexibility of teaching, like Susan just talked about. It allows teachers to plan activities that are based on the developmental levels of individual children, as opposed to planning activities that focus just on chronological age. Another great thing about the GELDS is that teachers can use them to plan activities that focus on higher order thinking. When teachers use GELDS to intentionally plan activities that involve problem solving or predicting, experimenting, and such like, then they're not only helping children to become thinkers, but they're also establishing another level of quality with their instruction.
Okay, good point. I had an opportunity to visit a pre-K teacher not too long ago, and let's take a look at this.
I use a lot of open-ended questions to promote higher order thinking because I want my children to think about beyond what the story says, what the words in the story says. Oh, there is a connection between the book that we read yesterday. What's the connection?
They have turtles.
They have turtles, and what did the turtles do in both stories?
They ran away.
They scattered away, they ran away. I want them to be able to infer from a picture. Why? How do you know that? I want them to kind of, those wheels in their brain to start turning. So that's the reason I ask a lot of open-ended questions to try to build and draw so they can develop that higher order thinking. I saw a raccoon looking back. A raccoon in the water?
Yeah.
What could that be?
He's in a boat, but it's his reflection.
Oh.
I see his mom.
So he's looking down at the water, and the water is doing something very special. It's showing him an image of himself. It's showing him his reflection. I know that it's important not only for answering questions in a story, but throughout life. So this is kind of like a lifelong learning we're kind of trying to work on.
I think Mr. Luke did a wonderful job of promoting higher order thinking skills. One thing I really liked was that he connected the prior experience. They had read a story about turtles in a previous lesson, and he connected that story, and the children actually remembered the story about the turtles, and he made that connection for them. What was something else you noticed about that clip?
One of the things that Mr. Luke really focuses on is the vocabulary there. You notice that in the story it talks about a reflection, and he takes time to ask children, you know, what that is, and then explain it to them. And so one of the things that we do in pre-K is we really focus on building vocabulary. We talk about what we're going to do, and then we do it, and then we talk about what we did. So really finding those opportunities to teach vocabulary to children.
Just one more thing I want to show about Mr. Luke. He had a great transition activity. Let's take a look.
3, 2, 1. Let's see. If your name begins with the letter that makes a sound T, stand up. You may choose one friend and find the center. All right, head to the center. Choose one friend and find the center. If your name begins with the letter that makes the sound ah or h, stand up, choose one friend, and find the center.
Jackie, Mr. Luke uses that transition to teach a standard. Why is this so important?
Well, all times of the day are opportunities for learning. even transitions and routines. For example, teachers don't have to wait until small group time or large group time to engage children in a math activity. Math could be counting the number of steps it takes to get to the playground. It could be lining children up in a boy-girl pattern. It can even be helping a child figure out how many napkins to put on the table. So every moment of the day is a teachable moment, and when teachers use the GELDS throughout the day, they're maximizing the time they have with their children.
I think it can also be used to help individual students during transition time. Susan, how will pre-K teachers use the GELDS to really individualize instruction?
So one of the things that's so important is we know in our pre-K classrooms that children are coming to us with a wide range of skills on different developmental domains. So teachers really need to use the standards to figure out how to address individual children's needs. The new GELDS really give teachers a tool to be able to do that because they show that progression all the way from birth all the way up to age 4, and then of course on into kindergarten for our kids that may be mastering the standards at 4. So teachers really have to only look at the standards to help them figure out if a child is not mastering a skill. Maybe I go down and look at the 3-year-old skill, or if I have a child that's mastering the 4-year-old skills, then I'm going to look ahead to take them to the next level.
Okay. I actually had an opportunity to sit down with 2 teachers, one a lead teacher and one an inclusion teacher. Let's take a look at how they individualize instruction and differentiate.
When we sit down to plan in my classroom, I am in a co-teaching classroom, so it's myself and a special ed teacher. So we will sit down together, and each month we have a theme that we base our lesson planning around, and we use the standards to guide the lessons that we plan for that week. So we'll sit down, we'll bounce ideas off each other, and we'll figure out what will work best for our students at the level that they're at.
We have 20 students all together, and 14 are typical students, and then we have 6 that have disabilities. And we just really, the other teacher and I, we work together in deciding how we're going to use accommodations and how we're going to differentiate our curriculum and our instruction, and things we might do throughout the day that are going to help the children with disabilities, and then also push the other children. You look at your standards, and that's really what the typical children are doing, but we also have to make the children with disabilities also meet those standards. In order to have a successful co-teaching classroom, my general ed teacher and I, we have little conversations throughout the day about how we're going to make this flow and how this is going to be easier for the students this way. And at the end of every day, we really sit down and talk to each other about, well, what did you think about that activity? Can we do it again tomorrow? And how can we do it better? Just think about this from a child's perspective, and a child with a disability and without a disability.
Now, Susan, of course, these teachers are in a collaborative co-teaching environment with students with disabilities, but how does differentiation and individualization work for all teachers?
So in the clip, we heard a lot about things like accommodations and differentiation and individualization. Well, those are things that shouldn't be just happening in an inclusion classroom, but in all classrooms. And really what all those words mean is let's figure out for this child how to help them meet this standard. So that's something teachers do naturally, but the standards, the new standards, are really going to help them figure out. So if I'm struggling, if this child isn't meeting the standard, what can I look at? What are the pieces in the standards that help me look at maybe the piece that they missed before then? So looking at the standard for a 3-year-old or maybe even for a 2-year-old. And so that's something all of our kids need. So as we look at individualization, it's good for all classrooms and all kids.
Okay. Jackie, one thing I've noticed in visiting pre-K classrooms and even in the clips today is that all these teachers, and I can tell these are master teachers, are covering several indicators with one activity. Is this something that we expect from our pre-K teachers?
Absolutely. Not only do we expect it, but we encourage teachers to cover multiple indicators when they're planning activities. For example, a teacher might intentionally choose to read a book about numbers or counting to not only cover language indicators, but math as well. What a great way to maximize an activity.
Okay. Actually, have a clip. Let's take a look at how one teacher does this.
Hickledy pickledy bumblebee, can you say this word for me? Tractor. Let's clap it. Tractor. Good job. Let's snap it. Tractor. Let's slap it. Tractor. Let's count it. Tractor. How many syllables does the word tractor have? 2. So how many beads are we going to put on our pipe cleaner? 2.
We were teaching children syllables and how to count out the syllables in words. And so what we did is we took pipe cleaners and beads. First of all, we did hickledy pickledy bumblebee, can you say this word for me? And one of the words, based on our farm theme, was tractor. And so what we would do, we'd have them clap out, tractor, and they would do it. And then once we clapped it out and snapped it and slapped it and able to count it out, then they would take their pipe cleaner and their beads, and they would, if the tractor had 2 syllables, they would take their 2 beads out of the bag and put 2 beads on their pipe cleaner. So that was one good visual and tactile way of learning how to count out syllables. And not only did that work with building vocabulary and teaching syllables, but it also works with those fine motor skills that sometimes children have difficulty with.
I think this clip shows us that all pre-K teachers who have a good grasp of the GELDS and how to teach the GELDS can optimize learning and save time with covering multiple indicators with one activity. I want to thank Susan and Jackie for joining me today. So that's all we have for our pre-K teachers for this episode of our GELDS webinar. There will be more to come. But before we wrap up today, I want to do a short demonstration of our GELDS website. Again, you can access our site at www.gelds.decal.ga.gov. As we move forward with the rollout, this site will serve as a portal for all information and resources related to the GELDS. As you can see from the home page, you can find background on our revision process, as well as a list of frequently asked questions and a list of our revision team. If you click on the GELDS tab at the top, it will take you to a searchable database of all the standards and age-appropriate indicators. They are organized by domain. If you click on a domain, you will then be able to filter the information any way you want. You can look at all age groups, or you can unclick boxes and only search a specific age group. So for pre-K teachers, you'd be able to do just pre-K. When you click on each age-appropriate indicator, a box will pop up. Eventually, these pop-up boxes will contain a plethora of information related to each indicator. For example, we'll have a rationale for each indicator, examples of learning in action, and examples of accommodations and modifications. And we're excited to say that for most indicators, you'll be able to see a video clip of what that indicator would actually look like in the classroom. You can also click on the Resources tab up at the top, and it'll give you even more resources, including all of these webinars that we are having on the GELDS. We're extremely excited about the rollout of our new Georgia Early Learning and Development Standards. And we look forward to a successful implementation over the next couple years. Thank you so much for joining us. I hope this information has been helpful. Until next time, thank you.